Another thing on the door, you want to check the door seals. And as you can see, this has a piece missing. The rest is kind of so-so. It could use new door seals. Then the exterior of the car, it's going to need a midline trim. And the trim at the bottom is also missing. The coupe trims at the back are different. Check out. The rest of the trims are good. From here forward, a coupe is the same as a sedan. But from here back, everything's different. I can see some crap on the paint there, but look at this. There's body work under here, because that's Bondo coming off from something hitting inside the panel and knocking it loose. There's a few little dings. They're kind of minor. If you're doing a paint job, then what you want to do is note every single dent in the car. You want to have the car clean and be looking down the sides. And any little dent, you want to note it. Not only by circling with a pencil, not a pen, a pencil, but also taking photos with those notations, maybe a piece of tape, so that as your body man is going through the process of getting it ready to paint, that he fills every single dent and he knows where everyone is. Once you sand off the gloss, it's harder to spot little teeny dents. So that's why you want to do it first. And note every single little ding. This, well, I could use a fender, but probably fixing it is going to be easier than replacing a fender, because these fenders are actually glued on along this attachment area here. I have a video on how to remove fenders. Okay, engine compartment. Things like the battery hold down, it is still there. Condition of the battery cables here, if they're very corroded. Throttle linkage, see how loose and sloppy it is. This seems it's okay. Somebody has disconnected the cruise control. And the fact is, very few 123 cars still have the cruise control still working. Usually it's the main brain. And actually there are a couple of companies that fix those main brains. They're located under the dash on the driver's side. On these, for 3 or so years, Mercedes used the Chrysler control, climate control, and it's been removed. And a bypass has been set up, obviously with a choke cable. Very simple, it works, compared to having to buy another climate control unit, which is really spendy. The fan, you want to grab the blade and move it this way to check the play in the fan clutch. And this one's nice and tight, it hardly moves. Somebody has disconnected the air conditioner So in that case, let's see if the piston, the crank turns in this York compressor. I don't feel any resistance. So probably it needs a compressor. You want to check your hoses. This is obviously a new replacement. There's your bottom hose down here that you want to see if there's cracks in it. Bend it a little bit like this. See if you see a crack. Then your belts. And with this car, it's pretty hard to see down in there. So you want to use a light and take a belt and turn it backwards. It's pretty hard to show you, but when you turn it backwards, you can see if there's cracks in it. If there are, you need to replace the belt or belts, and when I replace one, I replace them all. Then we've got our windshield washer tank, and lots of times these have holes in. This actually has fluid in it. So it probably holds fluid. Okay, that's a plus. Another thing, look for aftermarket wiring. When there are electrical problems, it's the first thing I look for, is to see if somebody's been messing with the wiring. And this looks all original, and I don't see any additional wires in here, so that's a plus. I'm inspecting the air cleaner. This hose lots of times breaks, and so you want to check that. You want to pop the air cleaner off and look at the element and see if it's very clogged up. If it's really clogged up, that's an indication that the car hasn't been maintained properly. You want to pull a dipstick out. This is overfilled by about a quart. It looks clean. It's not super black. And I don't see any whitish color or foam, which means that there's water leaking into the coolant galleries or into the pan. Take this cap off. Now, if the engine is warm, you do not want to be taking this cap off. You want to wait for the engine to cool. Take the cap off. Check not only the coolant level, but visually if you can see antifreeze. If the antifreeze is not that easily seen, you do want to use an antifreeze tester and see what the solution level is. Because if it has no antifreeze and you're in a part of the country where it freezes really good in the winter, that could mean a cracked block. So you want to make sure you've got antifreeze in there. Then over here to the master cylinder, and just by wiggling this a little bit, you should see the fluid, and I can see the fluid level is right there. It's a little bit low, but the fluid's there. Now on these style, it's impossible to stick your finger down in there and actually get some fluid on you because they have a little partition. But if you can get some fluid, use a very clean finger. Get a little bit of fluid and see how clear it is. Then your transmission, this is automatic, so we want to, and these can be a real bear getting these off. Want to check this fluid. It's a little bit dark. The smell test. I can't smell anything. If I could smell something, it would be burned. And that's an indication that the clutch packs or the bands have burned. But this appears okay. Now, with the engine running, and I'm not going to start it up because then it would be hard to hear me talk. With the engine running, you want to goose it a little bit with the linkage. Very important. Do not let anybody in the car. You never want to have somebody in the car when you're doing an inspection under the hood. It can be dangerous. So, you goose the throttle a little bit and just listen. If you can hear a knocking noise, you've got a bad rod. And the way you hear a bad rod is with the engine, a fresh startup with the engine. So there's no oil pressure in the galleries. So if the engine has been run, you want to wait 10-20 minutes. Then start it up and immediately goose it just a little bit. And right at that RPM of 1,000 to 1,500, if there's a loose rod, you'll hear it. It will rattle a little bit and then go away. Also, you want to listen for exhaust leaks where the manifolds are. And you can actually feel them sometimes by just putting your hand down here. You want to be careful. You don't want to burn your hand. But you can actually feel the gas coming out. Another reason to do this when the engine is cold and you just started it, because the manifolds won't be hot yet. Then, again with the light, if you can see the motor mounts. Now on this car, they have a oil deflector plate on top, so it's kind of hard to tell. But if you can see that that plate is rubbing on the rubber of the motor mount, then it probably needs motor mounts. Then you want to do a light check and make sure all the lights work. When you check for the rear lights, you want to have your helper hold the brake light, the brake pedal down as you turn on the tail lights and work the turn signals. The reason for doing that is if there is a bad ground, it will dim the brake light when you work the turn signals. You want to check your license plate lights. Check your backup lights. And you can do all these light tests with the engine not running, but with the key on to the position where the indicator lights light up in the dash. And you want to have those properly work, because when your key is on, it should light up the battery light and your seatbelt light. Once you start the car, that light will go out. It's basically a test to make sure this bulb works. And your indicators should work for your turn signals as well. With the engine running, you want to make sure your oil pressure gauge works. It'd take warming the engine up to make sure that your engine temperature gauge works. That's very important. Your fuel gauge, of course. Clock, maybe. Clocks half the time don't work, and it's not that important. Of course, when you take a test drive, you want to check your speedometer, odometer, and your trip meter. Interior-wise, your rear view mirror. This one's got good silvering. And wiggle it a little bit and see if it's loose. If it's loose, that means this adjuster is broken. And this one's good. Interior light works. Switch works to turn it off. I don't see that it's broken. Emergency brake. It should latch good, and the pedal should not go clear to the floor. If it does, it needs adjusting. The indicator for your turn signal lights, like I mentioned, should work. This one is slow on one side. So it either has a burned out bulb or the wrong bulb wattage has been installed, or possibly just a poor connection. Now, this is important to make sure that your stock stays in position. If it doesn't, it can be fixed. There's a video on how to do that I've done. Your glove box. Make sure that it functions. Your stereo, if there is one, test it. This one obviously has the type that you can remove the face so that somebody isn't inclined to steal your radio. So that's something that needs to be provided by the seller. Your shifter. See if it's very loose. If it's floppy loose, it needs new bushings. Also, there's a light in here that should light up when you turn on the headlights. It's pretty hard to see in the daytime, so a towel over it would help to make sure that light works. Seat adjusters. You want to make sure that both work. The lever here and your lever here. This one does not work. And that's usually because the track is slightly bent. Sometimes it can be fixed by simply getting a pry bar and prying the seat up to straighten that track out. Otherwise, the seat's going to have to come out. Your seat belts. You want to make sure they do retract, and that they do latch and release. And another test for a seatbelt is to pull it out and give a quick pull. It should jam immediately. So this one works good.